Heather, just sending it over to Heather for to start addressing the agenda.
So before we get started, I would like to recognize and welcome Council Member Ayala. And if you would like to send any greetings, you are welcome to, Council Member.
I don't really have much to add. I just, welcome everybody. And I think, we're all curious to kind of see where we are in terms of the timeline, and, hopefully we can get an update on, how the admin is addressing, right, the current crisis that has filled records to capacity, and is going to present a little bit of a problem moving forward for us. So hoping to just, get a little bit of that, and just really grateful for all of you for taking the time to come.
Perfect. Thank you, Council Member. We'll talk about site preparation updates again, the community engagement resources. We will have a presentation from DEP MOECJ, and then we'll open the floor for question and answers. So moving to the Bronx site updates, we'll hand that over to Yonkers.
Thank you, Heather. Hi, my name is Glenn Oleknowicz. I'm with Yonkers Contracting, the contractor for the site preparation project. So we'll go through the schedule milestones. Those who've been on these calls before have seen this slide before. As we all know, the NYPD is off the site. That happened in June. We are doing site investigations. We completed them for the most part, but we have a little bit more testing to do on site, just to do more verification of soils, but for the most part, it's completed. We've mobilized and the site fencing is up, but we move the fence as we perform the work. So the fencing will be something that gets revised as the job progresses. Excavation, we started our initial excavation activities just last week, and that will continue through March of 2023. Our on-site temporary sewer work, we're looking at starting in December. This is the rock excavation, and that's going to continue through to March. And then we have the work on 141st and 142nd Street, which is a temporary sewer that is in the street, and it's going to require street closure on 142nd and just some traffic displacing on 141st, but that's going to start in January and end in May. Next slide, please. All right, overview of the project activities. Again, this is a slide we've shown in the past. Pre-construction phase is complete. That was, for most part, just characterizing the soil and removing trees and the trailers on site. Stage one is what we're in right now, and that's excavating that area that she's highlighting right there. So we're working on that now. That should go to January, and then we'll work our way east to stage 2, 3, and 4. So that's going to happen from basically now until March, April of 2023, and then we're looking to be substantially complete in May. And then the final completion is in August, and that's mostly demobilization and just cleanup. Next slide, please. All right, here's some photos. On the left, we have the DOB fence that we put up along Concord. In the middle, we have a fence that we put up along 142nd Street. And on the right-hand side, we have temporary fencing on Bruckner Boulevard. That's so we can perform some of the drilling work we had to do. Once we are complete with the drilling, we will take that temporary fence out and put up the green DOB fence you see on the left-hand side. Next slide, please. All right, so we have set up monitoring throughout the project, and we have a plan for this. So there's 3 types of monitoring. There's vibration monitoring. Those are the black and pink squares. Yep, so they're in certain houses and also along Concord Avenue. There is noise monitoring, which is the green circles. Just to note, the noise monitoring will follow the work So make sure we're tracking the noise at the location. And then same thing with the air monitoring, which is the triangles. They follow the work around the site, and one has to be upwind, one has to be downwind. So you'll see they'll be in different locations, but it's just to make sure we protect the public by putting those in place. There's action levels that are tied to each one. When something's reached, we assess the situation and we move forward to make sure we abate any issues that we may have. So let's go to the next one. We show some monitoring results through in August of 2022. We had some issues with the air quality monitoring. These were issues that were more so just somebody with a broom sweeping right by an air monitor, causing dust to go up in the monitor itself. As soon as it went over the threshold, everyone stopped. They went and found out what it was, and then we fixed the situation. We had no noise level issues. In vibration, we did have 4 monitors that had 3 exceedances, but those exceedances were really due to the calibration and placement when people were going in to touch the monitors and make sure they're in place. So there was no issues with vibration on the project. The next slide is September. We had no issues with the air quality in September. Noise monitoring, we had some noise surpass the limit, but the daily, these were isolated incidents, but the daily was below the limits. But we made sure we go through and we once we get any overage, we take care of the issue, and we figure out what we have to do to make sure we adjust our activities accordingly. Vibration monitoring, we did have 5 monitors that recorded exceedances. They were isolated events. When we set up the drill piles right along Concord Avenue, that you have those 4 vibration monitors. They're very close to the actual piles. They did not go over the limit, but they set off the alarm that they were getting close. So the idea is we went there, we checked out what happened, and they went away. Everything else was just vibration from the cable being moved or something like that. So the thing is here is we are monitoring air, noise, and vibration daily basis, real-time notifications. So if something does come up, we get close to those limits, we know, and we stop and we rectify the situation. On the bottom, you can see there's a link to this environmental monitoring reports. Next, please. All right, so there was some lead found in 5 of the 73 cells out there, just to give an idea of it. It's a small part of that. These are lead limits that were above the allowable limits. So we're going to continue to, we're going to handle it just similar to the asbestos. We contain the material, we keep it down, and we excavate it and get it off the site in a similar fashion. So the fact that it is lead is just ups our requirements to dispose of the material, but we handle it very similarly, and we protect the public in a very similar way too. Next slide. Oh, and last one we have is here about rodent and pest control. We have bait stations inside and outside of the site on all 4 sides of the lot. Lately, we have not had much issues with animals or rats. Mostly, we had a raccoon recently, and that was about it. So we have an environmental rodent and pest control specialist that's on site, and if there's any problems, we make sure we rectify it immediately. Leo is talking to the community, so if there's problems, he lets us know, and we can change our bait stations as required.
Thank you, Glenn. I'm moving on to the community engagement and resources. Next slide. We do have our quarterly NAC meetings, and then as Glenn mentioned, we did find lead on site, and we made Community Board 1 aware, and we have a follow-up meeting to talk about the results of that. We're fortunate to say that at this time we anticipate minimum community impact, but we know that this is an important issue to get out and notify the community about. So we will be having a meeting next week, Thursday the 9th, to discuss that and ongoing issues. Next slide. And as you know, you've met Leo. Leo is on camera. He's our community construction liaison. He is able to be there on site, answer any questions directly. He is there Monday through Friday from 7 to 3:30. He's also bilingual in Spanish, and all of his contact information is there. Moving on, we will now have a presentation from DEP and MOCEJ.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Sure.
Heather, you mentioned you gave this information to the community board already?
Yes, ma'am.
You know when you gave that information to the community board?
Leo, do you have the exact date? I'm sorry, the date is not in front of me.
Well, this entire presentation was done prior to the community board as well too.
So the lead updates are happening next week, but this particular
Yeah, I mean so the community board is not aware yet of the lead update.
They were notified of the findings of the 6 findings, and we let them know immediately, and that the testing was done. What our next steps and procedures will be done at the meeting next week on the 9th.
Got it. So that's where I just need clarification. When were the lead findings sent over to the community board, you said?
We let the community board know that we found it. Not all, we didn't send all of the results of the lead findings.
And this was via email?
Yes, ma'am.
Was this via email? Was it
Yes.
Email?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Thank you. Okay.
Sorry, I went on mute. Yes, it was sent out via email.
Heather, this is Jeff. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes.
It's also posted on our website. So we directed the community board to, there's an executive summary, which makes it a little more understandable. It's a very technical environmental document. And then there's a larger, the actual report is on the website for anyone who wants to review it. And that's also, you know, again, they asked us to come back and provide a little more information. So that's what we're happy to do. So there's a local law that requires us, as soon as we're notified that there's lead above a certain level, the EPA standard level. So that's why we immediately, as you said, Heather, we alerted them over email. We also spoke to the council member's office as well, and then updated the website to provide more information.
Can we just drop that link in the chat? And then I guess NAC members, I imagine you want that sent out after the meeting, so you have it.
It's been already posted.
Perfect. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, back to the presentation. We'll give it back to DEP and MOCEJ.
All right, hi everybody. I'm trying to put my video on, 1 second. Here we are. Hi everyone, I'm Kathleen Esposito. I work for the DEP in the Bureau of Wastewater Treatment. Proud to be the lead of the Rikers feasibility study. I'm gonna stop my video to make sure that I can focus on the presentation, which I'll pull up now. Okay. Oh no, I hate it when it does this. Can you guys see these slides?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, it looks like the presenter view, Kathleen.
I don't know how to switch that.
I don't either.
If I click this button, now that means see all slides. I wonder if how's that?
That's good. That's what you want.
Better.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. So I'm presenting on the feasibility study for the consolidation of New York City wastewater resource recovery facilities on Rikers Island. We were laughing between DEP and MOCEJ. We are both doing parallel studies and we keep calling them the Rikers study. So we're trying to be very clear about which study and who's doing what. So DEP is looking specifically at the consolidation of wastewater resource recovery facilities on Rikers Island. I didn't want to assume that everyone here was familiar with DEP, so I'll just dwell on our mission and vision for a moment. DEP's mission is to enrich the environment and protect public health for all New Yorkers by providing high quality drinking water, managing wastewater and stormwater, and reducing air noise and hazardous materials pollution. And we have a vision to be a world-class water and wastewater utility while building a sustainable future for all New Yorkers. In BWT, the Bureau of Wastewater Treatment, where I work, we're responsible for the operation of all of DEP's wastewater assets, as distinct from drinking water and collections. We operate 14 wastewater resource recovery facilities. We have 96 pumping stations that pump the sewage from homes and businesses to the plants. And we also have combined sewer overflow facilities that are more new to our operations. At the 14 plants, we treat 1.3 billion gallons of water per day. And the plants you can see here in the yellow dots. And if you can see my cursor, I'll give you a teaser of the 4 plants that we're looking at as part of the consolidation study. So the feasibility study to look at the consolidation of plants on Rikers is required by one of the Renewable Rikers bills, Local Law 31 of 2021. And that requires DEP to complete a study to assess the feasibility of consolidating these plants onto Rikers Island. The map here provides an aerial view of the 4 wastewater resource recovery facilities. You might hear me call them WRFs. I'll try to stay away from all of our acronyms, that are in close proximity to Rikers Island, which is central to the aerial image there. These 4 plants have been around for almost 100 years. They treat significant wastewater flows ranging from 80 million gallons per day at Tallman Island, upwards of 275 million gallons per day at Ward's Island. And that's during dry weather. During wet weather, we basically treat twice that flow at the plants. So the feasibility study is timely for DEP based on a lot of different considerations. One that I was just touching on in the previous slide, the 4 plants, we call them the Upper East River WRFs, they were built almost 100 years ago, and operating and maintaining and upgrading these facilities to meet state of good repair and our permits is very challenging as they continue to age. It's also difficult to meet new regulatory requirements because we are landlocked, which means there isn't a lot of available property adjacent to the sites or even within them. And so that usually our solutions for regulatory challenges are to find very innovative ways to meet our treatment goals. There are rising challenges related to population growth and development. And of course, climate change presents challenges to our plants, which are necessarily located close to the water. So the Reimagine Rikers law is an opportunity for us really to look at our 4 plants that are in this area and think about what we could do if given a clean slate, what kind of opportunities we could really maximize based on energy savings, wastewater treatment requirements, meeting climate challenges and challenges from extreme storm events like we experienced during Hurricane or Superstorm Sandy. Another opportunity is that with a consolidation scenario, there's an opportunity for portions of the existing WRF properties to be delivered back to New York City for beneficial use. So that's something else that we're looking at. This slide presents kind of the nuts and bolts of the consultant contract that we have. In April of 2022, we started a contract with Jacobs, an international engineering design architecture firm, to do this feasibility study. There are 8 project tasks focusing on delivery of the feasibility study, which we expect in a little bit less than a year, so the end of October of 2023. And the local law due date for the study is March, so we're hoping to be a bit ahead of schedule with the completion of the feasibility study. Down below, you can see that we're looking at 4 consolidation scenarios. So it was important for us, because this is a feasibility study, we're not focused on selecting what we think is the right way to consolidate or not. We're really looking at a spread of different combinations or options and treatment technologies and how they could be combined to look at a spread of feasibility across the system. And that's within a 100-year planning horizon. We're looking at a lot of we think a lot about what the word feasibility means. We're looking at it from a technical point of view, a financial point of view, environmental. So a lot of different lenses. And another scenario that we're looking at as one of the 4 is what we need to do if we do not consolidate at all. So if we continue to operate our 4 plants where they are, what is needed to maintain our infrastructure and to continue to meet permit over that 100-year planning horizon. And that really helps us provide a basis of comparison with the other scenarios of the study. And it also helps us with our own internal planning for the short term and the long term. And lastly, this is a progress update. As I stated, we have about a year to go and we're just getting into the thick of it. We're thinking about the different scenarios and combinations. But since the spring, we've put a lot of groundwork into collecting information. We had a kickoff meeting with our consultants and our staff here in DEP. We've conducted site visits at the 4 wastewater resource recovery facilities, as well as at Rikers Island with DOC and MOCEJ. We're working to establish guiding principles, which we felt were really important for this type of study to make sure that we're grounded in the greater context of the borough-based jail plan and our plants, of course. We're working on a website that's close to being finalized. That is also required in the local law. And we're looking to conduct outreach. We recently provided a wastewater 101, which is like an overview of New York City wastewater treatment, to a lot of the close Rikers advocates and the renewable Rikers advocates. And so that's my update. I don't know if you want us to hold questions until after MOCEJ has a chance to present their project.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing now.
Okay, great. And I will start sharing. One moment. All right. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So my name is Ellie Khan. I'm a senior policy advisor at the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice, where I focus on clean energy.
The Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice aims to improve environmental quality, health, and quality of life for all New Yorkers through actions that reduce carbon emissions, prepare our city for a changing climate, and redress environmental injustices. I'm going to provide an overview of the draft scope of the energy study, focused on Rikers Island, to determine the feasibility of renewable energy infrastructure on a post-incarceration Rikers Island. Okay, so this study is required by Local Law 17, which was part of the Renewable Rikers Act, which also spurred DEP's study as well. This presentation focuses on the Local Law 17 study, although DEP and MOCEJ are working together very closely to make sure that the two studies are as harmonized as possible and sort of are apples to apples in their comparisons for future decision-making processes. Local Law 17 specified that the Rikers Energy Study had to be published as part of the city's long-term energy plan, which is called Power Up NYC. So it's going to be embedded in a larger report, but will be its own appendix to be able to treat this, this topic with the care and attention that it deserves. Power Up NYC is an overall inclusive planning process to identify near-term strategies that put the city on track to meeting our energy and environmental justice goals. For those of you who may not be looped into the energy world, we need to transition very quickly from an economy powered by fossil fuels to an economy powered by clean energy. And that economy must then benefit those who have faced environmental injustice in the past. So that's where our energy study comes in. Our idea is not to necessarily create a proposal for what specifically should happen on the island. We're developing frameworks to be able to compare different clean energy infrastructure types and scenarios, similar to what DEP presented for wastewater as well as present different potential ownership structures, which is one way that our study differs from DEP. There's a lot of potential options available for energy ownership. The idea is that this study will support broader master planning processes by understanding what the feasibility of different scenarios are, as well as the benefits of installing all the different kinds of clean energy technologies on Rikers Island. The goal is to equip the Rikers Island Advisory Committee, which was also formed during the passage of the Renewable Rikers Act, and other city decision makers and community advocates with a better understanding of what is possible. And chances are there will need to be additional study once a decision is made about what happens on the future of the island. We are going to be providing findings rather than recommendations. We will lay out options, but we're not going to be choosing winners, and we're not going to be saying this is what we think should happen. That decision making is not up to us. It's up to the advisory committee with input from community members. So our study timeline is quite a lot faster than DEP's because of the fact that it's part of the long-term energy plan, which is due on Earth Day of 2023. So that's April 2023. We've completed phase 1, where we developed a methodology for the study, incorporating the advisory committee's input to make sure that we weren't just consulting advisory committee individuals and advocates after we'd already made a lot of the decisions, and really making sure that other voices were included besides just the cities early on. Right now, we're just in the early stages of conducting some of the research with the goal of having preliminary findings in December. And we will be doing a larger public engagement process around that time, and we'll be happy to come back and present to you when we have some preliminary findings as well. We will then take the spring, the end of the winter, to incorporate some of that feedback, continue ironing out the last pieces of the study, and then publish by April 2023. We are using a bunch of key assumptions. I'd be happy to receive some feedback on these in particular. First off, we are assuming that all of the buildings will be demolished. We understand a lot of the buildings are very old, and were designed with the express purpose of incarcerating people or otherwise supporting jail operations. And since the island will no longer be used for that purpose, much of that infrastructure is likely not going to be particularly usable for renewable energy. However, if the advisory committee decides that they want to keep some or repurpose some of the buildings, our study is trying to be as modular as possible. So you could say, all right, let's assume that this section is now the building's left there and then the rest of it's for solar or something else. That way, we have some flexibility down the line, but we're providing the absolute maximum renewable energy potential by considering the island as a clean slate. We are assuming an installation year of 2030, which may seem like a really long time away, but not necessarily the case for large-scale energy infrastructure, which goes through lots of rounds of permitting and construction and environmental review and things like that, that make it a very somewhat long process. So 2030 may in fact be ambitious, but we wanted to set an ambitious goal for ourselves in terms of when this infrastructure might be operating. Within our study, we only considered potential uses that were proposed in the Renewable Rikers Act. So if somebody wants to build a shopping mall on Rikers or something like that, we're not considering that in our study because that was not in the Renewable Rikers Act. So what that means is we're only considering DEP's wastewater infrastructure as well as energy infrastructure as outlined in the law. Again, we're trying to make the scenarios modular. So if in the future another use for the land is proposed, you could just reduce the amount of land dedicated to renewable energy and be able to still use the study's findings accordingly. We're also assuming all of the current tax incentives and policies, as well as current technology costs. We're very fortunate that the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a major federal spending bill that will dedicate lots and lots of money to clean energy deployment, has passed because it will make our assumptions a lot better and certainly improve project economics. We're looking at a few other parameters. First, site conditions are very important. Proximity to LaGuardia Airport means there's a lot of restrictions on what you can and can't build. In addition, the Long Island Sound is right nearby, as is the East River, and those both present opportunities that I'll get into a little bit later. Similar to DEP, we're assuming that there are climate change risks and impacts. So things like sea level rise may impact the availability of land to be able to construct. So we don't want to build anything that's going to be flooded in the future or otherwise impacted by climate change. We are assuming that a certain amount of infrastructure needs to be upgraded. So the wires that physically connect Rikers Island to the rest of the electric grid likely need to be upgraded if any of these scenarios move forward. Whatever happens will require a lot of coordination with a variety of different agencies. So we will be highlighting how that coordination happens and when in the process. As I mentioned, we're looking at ownership models. This is something that's very important to us to make sure that the transition to clean energy is really inclusive and is for the benefit of New Yorkers. We're going to be looking at city capital ownership, where the city directly owns a lot of the infrastructure. We're going to be looking at community solar, which is a way to basically share in the benefits of solar, as well as direct community ownership, where a community group could physically own the assets, the energy infrastructure on the island. And then we're also looking at third-party private ownership as well. One last thing we will be assessing are jobs and other co-benefits. So we will be assessing how many potential jobs would these different scenarios create, how much pollution could we reduce through these scenarios, and what are the other types of community benefits that renewable energy on Rikers Island could provide. So here are our three scenarios. The first one we call local generation. And what that means is that you have solar and battery energy storage located physically on Rikers Island, blanketing the island in these two technologies. This is the one that can easily be scaled up and scaled down. If you say, I want to reserve this part of the island for X, Y, and Z use, you just scale down the solar and can sort of use that as a modular scenario. Rikers Island is an unprecedented amount of land in New York City. You don't usually get 413 acres that is suddenly free. And chances are any scenario here would have the largest solar array in New York City by far, if you were to install solar on all of Rikers Island. However, it would still be a really small portion of all of New York City's energy needs. So while it could be a really impactful project, it's not necessarily transformative of the energy system. On the flip side, this scenario is much faster and could be completed within a number of years than some of the other scenarios that I'll get into shortly. The next scenario includes solar and storage, same as the first scenario, but also includes infrastructure for interconnecting offshore wind. And I'll sort of get into a little bit what that means next. Basically, offshore wind needs a place to connect into where electricity is used, which is, New York City is a really big hub for electricity use, as you can imagine. And offshore wind has the potential to be really transformative and provide a very large portion of New York City's energy needs. There's a lot already in the process, but Rikers Island presents a new opportunity to connect even more offshore wind than is currently planned. However, the timeline for really transformative offshore wind interconnection is really long. And so it's hard to compare apples to apples with the first scenario because you're talking about totally different scales, totally different timelines, and things like that. But we will do our best. And then the final scenario is the same as the second scenario, but we're going to reserve land for DEP's wastewater resource recovery facility that they're proposing in their study. And then the solar and storage would be sized to be able to serve the energy needs just of that facility. And any extra land, if there is any extra, would be left over for other uses. So I mentioned I'd get into what it sort of means to interconnect a lot of offshore wind into New York City. So these sort of colored blocks on the map that you see here are different areas that have been leased out for offshore wind development. So basically people can put wind turbines in the water out here, and then they have to find a way to connect it to where electricity is in fact used. So if you can see my cursor, one way to connect it potentially, would need to be further studied, but is to take this giant block here and connect it through the Long Island Sound down to Rikers Island and then supply it into New York City's grid. Another option is to go from here or to go from here and connect through under the Verrazano and up the East River. There's a lot of wind already happening. This is the ones that are already under development and likely will be too advanced to be able to interconnect at Rikers Island. They'll already have their sites before Rikers Island is available. But you can see that Rikers Island is potentially in a really good place. The other thing I want you to notice here is that Rikers Island is like a tiny dot underneath the star. And if you think about, blanketing that with solar panels versus in the area of that compared to this area here, which is like the size of Rhode Island, and how much clean energy you could squeeze into a parcel that's like the size of Rhode Island versus the size of this tiny little dot over here. So the scales are just really different. And that's what I wanted to highlight here when you're talking about solar that's located on land versus offshore wind. Okay. In addition, we, as part of the long-term energy plan, which the Rikers study will be embedded within, we are going to model projected impacts of renewable energy on power plant run times, which basically means how much is a power plant running and how many emissions is it producing as it's running. So that's both air quality emissions as well as greenhouse gas emissions that can contribute to climate change. These modeling efforts will also provide some indication of where renewables and energy storage together could be used to reduce reliance on those fossil fuel power plants and prevent as much as possible burning of fossil fuels within New York City communities. The information from the Rikers study about the amount of offshore wind, the amount of battery storage, and the amount of solar will be used to feed into the Power Up study that will be focusing on replacing a lot of these fossil fuel power plants that are located in New York City today. And here's a summary of the types of outputs that we're hoping to have for our study for each of the three scenarios. We're not going to be sort of summing them up or saying we like this one the best. These will just be a list, and then if it's up to the advisory committee and input from general stakeholders as well, to decide which ones of these matter the most. We will be looking at footprint, which is sort of like the square footage or acreage of a given technology, how much renewable energy they can potentially provide, a guess at the costs. It's hard to tell by 2030, costs could change. The amount of infrastructure upgrades that are likely to be needed, what potential community benefits could come out of each of these scenarios, as well as the potential for creating jobs for New Yorkers. We then look at timeline for planning. Is it immediate term, short term? What are the steps that need to be taken in order to further plan any of these scenarios? Who needs to be involved in those planning efforts? And what are the clean energy or grid benefits? So how much can we reduce pollution in New York City? How much can we reduce greenhouse gas emissions from our electricity system? And then finally, we'd look at ownership options to make sure that the transition is inclusive. And with that, I think we can go to questions if there are any.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Ali. So now we have gotten to the end of our formal presentation and we now open the floor. I know it is 6:20, so we are scheduled to go to 6:30, but if you allow us, we will allow you the floor to ask any questions that you may have.
I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
Okay. Is any priority being given to moving the wastewater treatment facilities and the energy plants from Wards Island and the South Bronx?
I can take the South Bronx energy facilities. I have one more slide. Give me 1 second that I will share. Give me 1 second. So this is not part of the Rikers energy study. The long-term energy plan will be looking at the potential for power plant replacement and which ones are like the best options, but closing a power plant goes through several different processes that involve the state and other folks. So we will be looking at that as part of the long-term energy plan citywide. One thing I wanted to highlight is that the two main power plants in the Bronx are owned by New York Power Authority, which is a public authority, state authority. And NYPA is already in the process of evaluating the replacement of those two power plants and putting battery energy storage there instead. So I can share that report. Since NYPA is the owner, it's really up to, like, they're already pursuing this, which is great. It means we don't have to tell them to do it because they're already doing it. And so they will be pushing forward this project. They already released an RFP, so they're really moving forward with this. You can see here the Harlem River Yards and the Hellgate power plants. But I will send this study into the chat to make sure you have it, especially because it's particularly relevant for the Bronx.
Yeah, that was part of the, I mean, the reason for the question is because we have the highest, as you know, some of the highest asthma rates, and we saw this as, you know, an opportunity to kind of start from scratch in the South Bronx, if you will.
For sure.
And clean some things up that shouldn't, you know, exist in residential communities. Now, regarding the wastewater system at Randall's.
Sure. This is Kathleen from DEP again. I can speak to that. So we haven't gotten to that part of the feasibility study yet, but we will be thinking about different types of phasing scenarios as part of the study in order to build the costs. Right now, we have not gotten there yet in terms of which plant would go first, which I think is what you're asking about. Unless I'm wrong.
I just want to, no, it's fine. I just want to make sure that it's on, you know, it's in the universe of conversations that we're having. And then two really quick questions. Regarding the RFP for housing on the actual site, does the housing come first or does the facility come first? The housing will go on phase one.
So I think neither of our studies, this is Carly McLaughlin from DEP, neither of our studies is looking at housing in our scenarios.
Carly, I think this is specific to the jail site. So there's a portion of the Bronx facility that's slated for for housing.
Yes.
Councilmember, I'm not
Gotcha.
positive, and maybe someone on, I think the
Yeah,
sequencing.
quickly, the facilities comes first
Yep. that
and
was
then the housing.
Okay, all right. And then last but not least, regarding the increased number of inmates now at Rikers, is there any impact to the current plan as a result?
Hi, council member. This is America from the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice. Our projections remain the same because the projections to get to 3,300 are based on 25 years of studying of population data. And even though we have seen increases in 2021 and 2022, they're starting to plateau, and the current projections predict that we will hit 3,300 by 2027.
Perfect. Well, thank you all. This is a really good presentation.
Do we have other questions on the floor? No other questions.
There's a question in the chat.
Okay, let's see.
From Sandy.
It says, when will the clean energy be available?
So what we're assuming in the study, which may not necessarily be what ends up happening, is 2030. We are using that based on a best guess of how long it would take to develop clean energy infrastructure. Chances are, if you're talking about scenario one, where it's just on-site solar and storage, and you're not bringing energy from somewhere else, that could potentially happen a little bit faster, especially if decisions were made earlier than the 2027 complete closure date. Chances are the offshore wind may take a little bit longer than that because it takes a long time to develop. As you can imagine, you have to, run a cable all the way from, basically Rhode Island through past the entirety of Long Island and down into the city. So it takes a while.
Okay, the other question that I see in the box is this information going to be shared in the community sessions? Are you speaking directly about the DEP, that work, or just this general information?
Specifically with what the plans are for the water waste management system and for the movement for the clean energy. I think that would be great to have the public just, get a little bit more understanding about what are the future plans. So wondering if there's any community sessions where, they get to just learn more about it.
I can start with the energy study. As part of the long-term energy plan, there is a very robust stakeholder engagement process. I think we can probably put your names on the list to receive information about those sessions when they happen, but we are having community town halls for that plan, and Rikers will be included in those conversations. So yes. And then we're happy to also present to future meetings like this, or any other places where people are already convening and talking about these things.
Yeah, and on the DEP side for the wastewater resource recovery facility feasibility study, we do plan to do some outreach, at least to community boards and electeds that have in the communities of the 4 existing wastewater facilities. So we do plan to reach out to communities and talk to them about the work that's going on, and we will keep posting updates online in a website that'll be easier for people to find, we hope. So we do want to make this, transparent and have as much engagement as possible.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Okay. Well, we're just at 6:29. So since there are no more questions, I want to thank everyone for joining. This will be posted on our website, and you know how to reach Leo. You can reach us. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your Tuesday.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.